Hello, welcome back to I Say Are Wrong, and today is the first episode of The Pilgrimage. The first season of Doctor Who was shown on BBC One between the 23rd of November 1963 and the 12th of September 1964. The show was created by Sidney Newman in order to appeal to both adults and children alike, aiming towards a family-friendly show that both educated and entertained. The educated side of things was an important part, with the original aim being used to time travel as a means to explore scientific and historical events. There were three main types of stories designed for Doctor Who from the start. Historical pieces meant to educate any viewers about the point in history they were showing, science and technology in the future, and possible alternative universes with different presents. The production was quite unique from the start, as BBC's first female producer, Verity Lambert, oversaw the show, with David Whittaker being the story editor. The four main cast members were William Hartnell as the First Doctor, the titular alien who travels through time and space, Carol Ann Ford as his granddaughter Susan, Jacqueline Hill as the history teacher Barbara Wright, and William Russell as the science teacher Ian Chesterton. In total, there were 42 episodes in this series, covering 8 stories. Due to the BBC policy of recycling the film tapes, there are 9 missing episodes from the first season. 2 of these episodes have been recently reanimated, however, all 7 of the story Marco Polo are missing, apart from its audio. An Unearthly Child. The first ever serial for Doctor Who had an important job: set up the characters and get people to come back for more. Unfortunately, the show had a barrage of hurdles to overcome before the first episode even aired. There were several delays in its production, and the whole first episode had to be re-recorded due to the changes in the script, costume and effects. The production was led by Verity Lambert, directed by Wallace Hussein, and written by Anthony Colburn and C.E. Webber. The re-recording of the episode, which would go on to be the final product, was filmed a mere month before it aired. Then, finally, it aired on the 23rd of November 1963 to a smaller audience than anticipated. This might have had something to do with the assassination of the American President John F. Kennedy, which happened a day earlier. However, the first episode was repeated the next week and had relatively good views and a sizable audience by the last episode of the serial.
That's not right.
The serial begins with a young girl named Susan Foreman at school, with her 2 teachers, Barbara Wright and Ian Chesterton, worried about her. She seemed odd compared to the other teenagers, with seemingly greater knowledge of science and history than her teachers, yet she is clueless about more mundane things. They decide to follow her home to speak with her grandfather and realise that she is living in a small blue police box inside a junkyard. They force their way into the police box in a desperate attempt to find Susan, despite the protestations of an elderly man they find outside it.
What are you doing out there?
She is in there! Close the door, please! But, Barbara, what you like?
And finds it is far larger on the inside than the outside. Because they now know the elderly man, known as the Doctor's secret, he refuses to let them leave and in a tantrum sets the ship in motion, flying them all the way back to the Stone Age. They go out, investigate, meet a tribe of cavemen desperate to learn the secret of fire, do some hijinks, cause some mischief, terrify the locals and attempt to get back to the ship. There is so much of Doctor Who which comes through from this first serial, yet so much that is missing. Highlights of this episode include the Doctor almost murdering someone with a rock, kidnapping people without much thought, Susan terrifying the cavemen by using their family's skills to light on fire, and Barbara and Ian being seemingly the only 2 reasonable ones around. The characterisation of the Doctor has changed over the programme's 60-year run, and nowhere is it more evident than this first episode. In the first 3 serials, the Doctor comes across as very antagonistic, sometimes to the point where he is the only one that causes trouble for the group.
Let me get this straight. A thing that looks like a police box standing in a junkyard, it can move anywhere in time and space.
So, The Unearthly Child for me, I have watched so many times. This is about like my 10th or 11th time I've actually watched this serial, and it's such an iconic kind of entryway into the programme, the first episode at least, definitely. And I feel like the first episode peaks so high and then the other ones kind of go kind of downhill from there, because although the first episode is brilliant and a really, really strong introduction to the programme, the next 3 episodes, the kind of plot is a bit contrived. It seems a bit repetitive, and it does keep going over and over again. However, it's not the worst I've ever seen. There's definitely worse Doctor Who serials out there, including one that's going to be in this video, so keep an eye out for that one. It introduces the characters really well, with Barbara and Ian plainly showing from the start what kind of people they are and what they're like for each other, which I particularly like. The unearthliness of Susan, and to a lesser extent the Doctor, offsets well against Ian and Barbara and showing how they're not quite there from the start. I think that the caveman plot is quite a slog, but it does have some gorgeous character moments in there, especially between Ian and Barbara, that I really do appreciate, and does a good job of setting up what their characters are going to be like for the rest of the season, and kind of giving you a preview of what their arc is going to be like. So Unearthly Child, I think it's probably, on the whole, a middle of the road serial. However, the first episode is absolutely brilliant and probably one of the most brilliant episodes to start a programme with. The Daleks. Now, The Daleks is the serial which took Doctor Who from a small family show into a mania that would propel the show through 2 spin-off movies and into the legacy it has now. The serial introduced the iconic titular Daleks, strange creatures which live in metal casing and move about their metal city. However, the show's creator, Sidney Newman, was not pleased with the script as he wanted to avoid any bug-eyed monsters. Due to time constraints, this was the only serial that was able to go ahead, and it proved a hit for the show. It was written by Terry Nation, directed by Christopher Barry and Richard Martin, and produced by Verity Lambert. In total, there are 7 episodes within this series, spanning a total of 175 minutes. So, at the end of An Unearthly Child, the Doctor sets their TARDIS off again, and it arrives in a barren-looking planet. In order to explore the world around them, and in particular a great city that they can see in the distance, the Doctor sabotages his own ship, forcing them to try and find a replacement part to fix it. And that is what leads to one of the most iconic cliffhanger scenes of any classic Who, the introduction of the Daleks. In the rest of this serial, we are introduced to the Thals, the rival race to the Daleks, which are dead set on being peaceful no matter the cost. After a lengthy debate, Ian gets punched, and that somehow convinces the Thals not to be peaceful anymore. So they decide to fight the Daleks. Oh, and a bunch of other things happens, like them getting radiation poisoning and an obstacle course with mutant bubbling quicksand. Anyway, there's some cracking points of this story, like Barbara getting it on with one of the Thals at the end, and the Daleks being reliant on both radiation and the static electricity from the metal plating on the floor, as well as playing on the fear of nuclear war and nuclear winters. Fun fact, Ridley Scott was originally supposed to be the designer for this serial, but he was replaced by Raymond Cusack, who created the iconic design for the Daleks. He also wanted the bumps of the Daleks to light up with lights on their head. However, due to the costs constraints, it just had to be plain.
You wanted advice, you said. I never give it, never. But I might just say this to you. Always search for truth. My truth is in the stars, and yours is here.
Now, the Daleks has the starts of what modern Doctor Who would become. The 5th and 6th episode definitely is the weakest point of this story. It definitely drags, and I think it probably doesn't help just because it is a 7-episode serial. Most people watching this in the modern day aren't used to such a long episode of Doctor Who. So when they are watching it, by the time you hit the 5th or the 6th episode, it does start to drag a bit in your mind, and I have found that with these rewatches, that generally the longer they are, the 5th and 6th episodes tends to always be the episodes that I just don't like out of the entire serial. Now, I could split it up into watching it in 2 separate days, but I don't like doing that. I like watching them all in one go. The section of the 5th and 6th episodes were mainly just kind of seemed like a shoehorned adventure sequence where they kind of went on a tour of the world and they tried to sneak in, and I kind of felt it was pointless at sometimes. However, I will say, like the serial before, there were some absolutely cracking moments between Ian and Barbara and the Thals throughout it. I also really, really liked Susan's character all the way through this. I feel like she was given a lot more to do than she was given in the previous serial or serials that are to come, especially when she's the one that has to go and look after the rest of the group by getting the medication for the radiation poisoning. And it's just that I really like the fact that Susan gets a lot to do in that section of the episode. As usual, the introduction of the Daleks is absolutely iconic, and I still to this day love the first scene, even though it looks literally like they've got someone with a plunger sitting behind the camera going, ooh. I just absolutely think it's brilliant the way Barbara reacts to it. But it sticks in the mind and it makes you want to come back for more. And you can see how it kind of created this mania over the Daleks, especially because of the way they were designed, and it was just absolutely brilliant. I did find it slightly horrifying the way that they slowly succumbed to the radiation poisoning, even though they didn't actually die. Especially, it would have been even more topical at the time because it aired in the middle of the 60s or middle of the Cold War. I can't imagine what it would have been thought of, and I especially like the politics behind it, which I know I might do my own video on at some point, politics in Classic Who, but otherwise that was my view of the stories. A very good serial that I would highly recommend.
The Edge of Destruction.
After the height of the Daleks, Doctor Who was originally planning on going straight into another 7-episode epic, Marco Polo. However, a common misconception was that due to the amount of work that was going into that serial, the sets and preparations were not yet complete, so a small, low-budget 2-episode serial was added in order to buy the crew some more time and to ensure they did not go over budget. Because this was not completely true, the main reason that this short serial was created was due to the initial run of Doctor Who episodes that were set at 13, and between an Unearthly Child, 4 episodes, and the Daleks, 7 episodes, it left 2 episodes between this and a new set of episodes which was to start with Marco Polo. During the production of An Unearthly Child, Doctor Who was initially cancelled, with The Edge of Destruction supposed to be a conclusion, but that was changed after the overwhelming success of the programme. This was completely set inside the TARDIS, with the only 4 main characters being present. Due to this serial being a 2-parter, the runtime is roughly the same length as a modern episode, around 50 minutes. It was written by David Whittaker, directed by Richard Martin and Frank Cox, and produced by Verity Lambert. The episode begins with the Doctor trying to correct the navigation circuits on the ship and causing a small explosion. Everyone is knocked unconscious, but when Susan and Barbara wake up, Susan has trouble remembering who Barbara is. Together they help the Doctor, who is injured, and while trying to get first aid supplies, the TARDIS door opens and Susan becomes convinced that something has boarded the ship and trying to take control. After Susan tries to attack Ian in a burst of paranoia, which, surprisingly, is one of my favourite scenes with Susan, she collapses, leaving the other 3 to try and figure it out. Slowly, the Doctor also turns on Ian and Barbara until Barbara goes off on him in a cracking outburst.
How dare you! Do you realise, you stupid old man, that you'd have died in the Cave of Skulls if Ian hadn't made fire for you? Accuse us! You ought to go down on your hands and knees and thank us.
In the end, she manages to figure out that the TARDIS is causing all of the problems in a desperate attempt to warn the passengers of what's going on. This serial is fully as a deep dive on the 4 main characters and their relationships with each other, going from still slightly hostile and making their relationships stronger by the end. This episode was unique in the show's history, with the entire serial taking place inside the TARDIS and introducing the idea that the TARDIS might be a sentient creature with the power of messing with its passenger's mind.
We must look after you, you know. You're very valuable.
Next up is The Edge of Destruction. So, this is one of the more insane and kind of batshit episodes of Doctor Who. Basically, there's accusations and there's threats flying around constantly between the 4 main characters, and the conflicts of the 2 previous episodes are kind of reaching a headway in this one, and kind of spilling over and coming to light, and they're being dealt with. It's a really good kind of bottle episode in order to kind of deal with the kind of discord between the characters of the sets of characters between the Doctor and Susan and Ian and Barbara. And you can see it by the end that they come together in a much stronger way, which I adore. And I also love the kind of psychological horror of the thought that the TARDIS is sentient and being able to control and mess and torture psychologically the group of people that are inside the TARDIS to try and get self-help. I absolutely love that idea, and I especially love when Doctor Who picks back up on that idea in future episodes. The thought of whatever you're inside psychologically torturing you because it needs help and you don't know how to help it. It's just absolutely terrifying, and I absolutely love it. There are some absolutely brilliant moments throughout this. I think it's nice and succinct. It doesn't give it time to drag. It's just short, 50 minutes in and out. So there's not really too much kind of weight dragging this one down, unlike the Daleks. But I do think that there are some questionable scenes in it, mainly acting wise, but I think it's just because it was designed in the 60s, which is a lot different from now.
Marco Polo.
Next up is Marco Polo, the other epic serial in the first season. Written by John Lucarotti, directed by Wallace Hussein and John Crockett, and produced by Verity Lambert, it spans 7 episodes. Unfortunately, this is one of the serials which are completely lost due to the BBC's policies of wiping and reusing the film tapes due to production costs. These episodes are still missing almost 57 years after it first aired, however, the audio still remains. There are 2 ways to experience this serial. An audio narration linking the original audio was recorded by William Russell and released, as well as a novelisation written by John Lucarotti. There are also reconstructions using the surviving telesnaps created by Loose Cannon. I chose to use the audio narration and original audio for this particular episode. John Lucarotti drew heavily from the memoirs of Marco Polo to write the atmosphere of this serial, mainly from the first journey to Peking in 1275. There is quite a lot of racism in this episode, particularly with the use of yellowface and the stereotypes associated with the Mongols. Yellowface is the practice of using makeup to make white actors look Asian. The one exception was the actress who portrayed Ping Cho, who was half Burmese. I've linked below an article which explains the racism behind this practice, as well as its history and how it was used to limit the roles of Asian actors and the whitewashing of cultures. Now, this is a long summary, so I'm going to sum it up as quickly as I can. The TARDIS arrives in the plains of Pamir with the ship badly damaged from the adventure before, and it's unable to give heat, light or water, leaving the TARDIS crew in the freezing cold without any protection. While Ian and Barbara go out and search for wood for a fire, they become surrounded by Mongol soldiers who try to kill them, stopped by a man named Marco Polo. He welcomes them into his travelling caravan and introduces them to his friend Tigana, a peace emissary who is at war with Kublai Khan and a young Chinese woman named Ping Cho, who is on her way to an arranged marriage. Marco Polo brings the TARDIS with them, but forbids the Doctor from entering. He also declares that he is taking the TARDIS as a present to the gift to the Emperor in order to buy his chance to get home. The travellers continue with their journey and begin to cross the Gobi Desert. Due to Marco Polo taking his TARDIS, the Doctor refuses to talk to anyone that night, with Susan becoming restless. This, combined with the fact that she thinks Tigana is acting suspicious, it prompts her and Ping Cho, with which she becomes fast friends, to follow him into the desert. They are trapped in a vicious sandstorm, accidentally stopping Tigana from doing what he wanted to, which was poisoning the remaining water supplies. Instead, he damages the containers during the next night. Unaware that Tigana has caused the destruction of their water, Marco Polo asks them to search for a water source in the desert, while they try to press on with the remaining supplies. Miraculously, the Doctor and Susan manage to use condensation inside the TARDIS to keep the caravan glowing and give people enough to drink. This infuriates Tigana. The group goes through another bunch of stuff, which sort of repeats that cycle, and Ping Cho ends up running away, whilst trying to help her new friends get back to their ship. The group fails to escape once more, and they are prevented from going near the TARDIS, with Ian being sent to try and find Ping Cho. Ian and Ping Cho reunite and are attacked by a bandit, uncovering the truth behind Tigana's betrayals. Meanwhile, the rest of the party arrive at the palace of Kublai Khan. The Doctor and Khan quickly hit it off, with the Doctor gambling over a game of backgammon to get his TARDIS back. However, he loses, with all hope seemingly lost. Ian and Ping Cho return to tell the truth about Tigana, and he gets stopped by Marco Polo. The TARDIS key is returned to the Doctor in the end, leaving everyone in the maid cast happy. Marco Polo. Now, this was the first time that I actually managed to sit down and watch Marco Polo. I didn't watch it, I listened to it using the narration by William Hartnell, and I was actually expecting to like it a lot more than I actually did. I found it kind of fell flat for me, unfortunately. I went into it expecting this brilliant long length serial epic that everybody kind of talks about, and I think the sets and the actual images that they sent out were absolutely beautiful, because it's lost, there's just so much to this story that you don't get from that. With the audio especially, I felt like it dragged a lot. I had the same problem with the Daleks as I do with this, with episodes 5 and 6 really dragged too much for me. Unfortunately, I don't have the same attachment to Marco Polo as I do to the Daleks, so I felt like it kind of dragged the whole thing down instead of just kind of being 2 odd episodes out. There's quite a lot of back and forth, so escaping, trying to get the TARDIS, failing, escaping, trying to get the TARDIS, failing, so on, and it just keeps on going. There were some very nice bits, especially with Ping Cho and Susan finally getting her friend her kind of the same kind of age as her, as it were, and that side of things. However, I just was frustrated all the way through. I was like, oh, come on, just do something a little bit different. I think the end of it was really good. The last episode I really enjoyed, with the Kublai Khan and the Doctor gambling over the TARDIS. But again, I think I'd probably enjoy this one a lot more if, unfortunately, I could see the original sets and how beautiful they were, because such a large part of historicals for me are being able to appreciate the costumes and the sets and the design of things, and that's what I love a lot about the historicals. So having to miss that out and not even getting the description of it, because the audio description is just showing you the action, it does kind of bring it down a lot for me. But I hope that in the future they decide to animate this one, even though I know it's a lot of work to animate it. I feel like it would be worth it, especially if they could manage to get to the same level of detail as the original sets were, because they looked absolutely stunning. I feel like if I could rate these two separately, between the images and the actual story, the images would be a lot higher. However, for this one, I'm just going to have to take it as the story, and it was kind of middle of the road for me. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't brilliant either.
The Keys of Marinus. The Keys of Marinus is the start of a second half of the season 1. It is most remembered for its structure, with every episode having a different mini-plot, setting and set of background characters, while sticking to its overarching plot. It was written by Terry Nation, directed by John Gorey, and produced by Verity Lambert.
But I don't believe that man was made to be controlled by machines. Machines can make laws, but they cannot preserve justice. Only human beings can do that.
The TARDIS arrives on a small island of sand and glass, which is surrounded by a sea of acid, with the only structure being a large tower. Inside the tower is an old man named Arbitan, who forces them to find 4 keys to a machine in order to protect his planet. They have been hidden in a different location each in order to stop the villains of the piece, the Voords, from getting them. Unable to use the TARDIS, they're giving small time dials in order to let them travel to these places. First, they hop to a city using hypnosis to keep their people under control with illusions, to a living jungle which tries to kill all visitors, to a grey ice wasteland with an unsavoury hunter, to finally a futuristic city in which Ian is trialled for murder. This serial has a great advantage of having a different setting and different genre for each episode.
Come along, you're all running around here like a lot of scared chickens.
We were waiting for you.
But I'm here. My dear, you drive me around the bend. I don't know what's going on.
Keys of Marinus is a perfect example of how to use the serial format to the Doctor Who's advantage. So basically each episode
working within its own little setting and plot and characters is a great way of doing it, especially because they have to jump around places, and it gives the actors time to be off for their holidays, like William Russell not being in a couple of episodes, and Carol Ann Ford being the same. So basically, the first episodes, I think it's very hard to like talk about it as a whole, because I like to think about the episodes like their own little mini stories. I do think my least favourite one was the Ice Caverns one, just because I don't get good vibes from it. And otherwise, I think the Creeping Terror one, when it was just Barbara and Ian, I really, really liked that one. And I also really enjoy the kind of courtroom drama of the last 2 episodes, bringing it into the finale. It is not too... It's very well paced, with real solid characters that kind of feel good by the end, especially you kind of get invested by their relationships at the end. And there were 3 bad guys in the last 2 episodes, which I thought were the same person. Turned out they weren't. They were completely different people. Don't know what was going on there. But other than that, I thought the words were really well designed, and I thought the idea of a glass island in the middle of a sea of acid was just kind of cool. So I really do like the Keys of Marinus, even though I know quite a lot of people don't, but hey ho, can't have your opinions here.
The Aztecs. The Aztecs was another serial similar to that of Marco Polo. It was mainly historically based, designed to teach children about different countries' history. It was also written by John Le Carrotti, directed by John Crockett, and produced by Verity Lambert, and spanned 4 episodes. This is the only serial written by John Le Carrotti which survives, as his other works, Marco Polo and The Massacre, are completely missing. It not only dealt with the impacts of possibly alternating history and the ethics surrounding it, however, similar to that of the serial Marco Polo, the cast was majority white, portraying native Aztecs, harmful stereotypes being used throughout.
You can't rewrite history, not one line!
The TARDIS arrives in 15th century Mexico, where soon after their arrival, Barbara is mistaken for a goddess. Throughout the serial, they have to keep the facade up in order to stay alive, all while trying to reach the TARDIS, which is locked inside an impenetrable tomb. Barbara, in particular, is fascinated by the culture. After Barbara is mistaken for a goddess, she becomes obsessed with the idea that she can stop the human sacrifices carried out by the Aztecs and stop the Spanish from wiping them out. The Doctor tries to stop her, but quickly realises she is not listening, so tries to work on quickly getting the TARDIS back. He talks to a woman called Kameka, widow of the man who built the tomb. Meanwhile, Susan is taken to a school to learn more about Aztec customs, and Ian is put in charge of the military. Because of Barbara's attempts to stop the sacrifice, the local priest believes her to be a false goddess and sets up Ian for a fight which he is expected to lose. Problems ensue when the Doctor accidentally helps Ian's opponents to cheat, to which Ian loses the fight later. And in a great twist that gets me in stitches every time, the Doctor accidentally gets engaged to Kameka, not realising that the sharing of Coco means a proposal. Hijinks ensue, and eventually the crew manages to escape, with Kameka wishing the Doctor well. Barbara is noticeably shaken by her experience and leaves wondering what the point of time travel actually is.
Where did you get hold of this?
My fiancée.
I see. You're what?
Yes, I made some cocoa and got engaged.
The Aztecs leans very heavily into horror and tenseness and kind of being in that kind of situation that you can't escape. And kind of all 4 characters are split up throughout the serial, so that adds to that kind of tension, that horror, that unknowingness of it all. And I think that it works to the disadvantage when they're split up, but in this case I think it was good because it shows how they're not very well, and they don't know enough about each other to work well separately, so they had to come together to work well together until maybe a couple of episodes down the line when they do end up working well together. So it's that difference that kind of brings the chaos to this episode, which I do admittedly quite like. However, it isn't the greatest of representations of the Aztecs, mainly because it's from England in the 60s, so not great. But the pacing and twists do work well though, even though I felt like this one dragged a lot. I feel like that was less it actually dragging and me feeling it was dragging, which were probably 2 completely different things. So that's why I also thought this one, similar to Marco Polo, was kind of middle of the road. However, the Aztecs costuming is absolutely brilliant, and the amount of research and dedication that went into creating the costumes for the Aztecs was a lot, and they worked closely with universities to get the costuming as close as they could, which I appreciate. I enjoy very much watching that.
The Sensorites. This was the first serial in Doctor Who to explicitly state that it was set in the future of the human race. It was written by Peter R. Newman, directed by Mervyn Pinfield and Frank Cox, and produced by Verity Lambert. It takes place over 6 episodes and has the first description of the Doctor's homeland, as well as built in the species' lore of being telepathic.
Yes, it all started out as a mild curiosity in the junkyard. And now it's turned out to be quite a great spirit of adventure, don't you think?
When the TARDIS materialises on a spaceship, the gang find that only 2 crew members passed out on top of their controls. Once woken up, they explain that they have been telepathically attacked by a group of creatures called the Sensorites, and they are being held against their will for unknown reasons. Susan finds out that she can telepathically communicate with the Sensorites, and Ian, Susan and the Doctor, along with 2 of the crew from their ship, travel down to the Sensorites planet. This planet, known as the Sensor Sphere, is made up of the rigorous caste system, which the ranks of the people are determined by their badges and sashes. Soon our trio are pulled into a world of politics, intrigues, poisoned water supply, and the understanding of an alien culture. The serial was used to explore the impact of war upon soldiers, especially soldiers who refused to give up fighting after the war had ended. The designer, Raymond Cusick, the same man who gave the Daleks their iconic design, deliberately avoided the use of straight lines and right angles, opting for curves and circles instead, focusing on creating a unique alien feel to the Sense Sphere.
And when we get home to our own place, I think we should try and perfect it.
When will we get back, Grandfather?
I don't know, my dear. This old ship of mine seems to be an aimless thing. However, we don't worry about it, do we?
The Sensorites grabbed me right from the beginning. I know this is really going to be an unpopular opinion, because I know quite a lot of people do not like the Sensorites, but this was my favourite episode of this series. This was the only one I actually hadn't watched fully beforehand, and for some reason, every time that I've watched this in the past, I've just skipped over it. No idea why. Maybe just because people keep kind of talking it down. I really, really enjoyed it. I loved the fact that it kind of subverts your expectations 2 episodes in. So like for your first episode and some of the second episode, you think that the bad guys are the Sensorites and the humans need rescuing, and then you realise for the next couple of episodes, the Sensorites, they're doing it for a reason, and kind of think, oh, there's not really a bad guy except one specific Sensorite that tries to cause chaos, and then you get to the end and you're like, oh, this subverts it again. You're actually looking at humans are the bad guy, and it's not so much about bad guys and good guys, but about the impact that wars have on people's psyche, and how people react when a cause that they've dedicated their entire life to, like a war, suddenly ends, and then they just can't cope with it and they have to keep believing in it. Susan, again, has a lot to do in this episode, which I really like, and the fact that she can cyclically link to the Sensorites and talk with them that way, I really like, because I think it shows a lot of Susan's telepathic abilities work well in a story setting, even though she does kind of lose them by the end. And it also kind of pre-hints Time Lord's ability to communicate psychically with each other before Time Lords were even a thing yet in the programme. So I also like the exploration of alien culture, especially when the aliens don't look human, which is something that happens quite a lot in Doctor Who, because of naturally the way that budgets go and that sort of things. Quite a lot of the humans and the aliens look alike, but in this case they really don't. They're definitely not human lookalikes, and they're completely different from kind of anything we've really seen so far in Doctor Who by the time this episode aired, especially with the layout of the sets, which were entirely done with curves instead of straight lines in order to create that kind of eerie otherness about it. That which was refreshing. So that was my favourite episode of the season, and big 5 stars for that one. The other ones I'm not technically going to give reviews because by the end of the first Doctor's season I'm going to rank them all. So I don't want to give them reviews at... I don't want to give them stars at the moment.
The Reign of Terror. Finally, we come to the last serial of the first season. As it is probably recognised by now, early classic Who alternated between a science fiction based story to an educational historical based one. This was the Reign of Terror, which was based during the French Revolution, a period of history which was apparently one of the Doctor's most favourite. The 4th and 5th episode of this serial was partly missing, however they have been reanimated using the original audio and telesnaps. Loose Cannon Production has also produced a reconstruction with the audio and the photographs taken from the shoot. It was written by Dennis Spooner, directed by Henrik Hirsch, and produced by Verity Lambert. It very much has echoes of the Scarlet Pimpernel.
Good day to you, sir. Pleasant dreams. Here.
The Doctor and gang arrive a short distance from Paris in the year 1794, right in the midst of the French Revolution and the resulting fallout. By stumbling into the middle of an aristocratic house, the Doctor gets knocked out and abandoned in a house which is on fire, where Ian, Barbara and Susan are arrested by French forces, taken to Paris and scheduled to be guillotined. In an attempt to escape, they all get mixed up in an escape chain, an English spy plot, here comes the Scarlet Pimpernel folks, and Susan falls ill during her time in prison. The Doctor dresses up as a high-ranking officer in an attempt to save Susan and accidentally gets embroiled in the politics of being in charge of a revolution. There is a famous cameo in here, which seems a bit pointless, but get the famous names in there. There's also a nice bit where Doctor tries to whack someone with a shovel, which I do love.
Our lives are important, at least to us. But as we see, so we learn.
And what are we going to see and learn next, Doctor?
But unlike the old adage, my boy, our destiny is in the stars. So let's go and search for it.
After my very favourite serial comes into my very least favourite serial of this episode, of this season, we've got The Reign of Terror. I never really liked this when I watched it originally, and when I watched it this time, I ended up watching it with the animated version, which I really, truly struggled with. The aesthetics were brilliant, the costumes were good, I thought that they were well done, and so were the sets, but however, I just didn't really like the story. I had a really strange undercurrent, which I really see in Doctor Who, especially with the politics of Doctor Who. It seemingly blamed like the poor people and the rebels, and had this kind of, the rich know what's right, the rich know what's going on, us poor people, that's sort of kind of undercurrent throughout it, which I wasn't a big fan of. So I rather feel like they were missing the point with this one, like why the whole French Revolution happened in the first place, but that's probably a story for another day. Ian especially actually contributed to that a lot, but Barbara at least snapped out of it and realised what was going on and went, nah. Susan wasn't a big fan of this episode with her in particular. She didn't have a lot to do. She was ill for most of it, so kind of slept on screen. And there were some really good things, such as Doctor hitting someone in with a shovel. Whack. Which I'm a big fan of. But otherwise, that's the last episode, which was my least favourite of this series.
The first season of Doctor Who burst into the screen over 8 serials used to fill a gap for tea-time television and attempting to match the success of another science fiction show on ABC. When it first aired in 1963, no one could have thought that almost 58 years later it would still have an enduring legacy and kick off one of the most iconic worlds and characters. The bug-eyed monsters that Sidney Newman was against contributed to the mania that surrounded the programme, and that high was not going away anytime soon. There were a number of episodes which were planned for the series that did not make it onto the screen for a number of reasons.
Doctor Who and the Hidden Planet by Malcolm Hulke was replaced by the Keys of Marinus because the Hidden Planet was deemed problematic. #cancelled. And Terry Nation was due to write another historical, Doctor Who and the Red Fort, about the Indian Rebellion of 1857, but was prevented due to other commitments. I had great fun revisiting the first season of Doctor Who, and I adored rediscovering the original TARDIS team, and it's obvious the initiative, stories and the characters is what made it a success and helped it carry on to its next season. The relationship between Barbara and Ian in particular is brilliant, and you can feel them growing from colleagues to friends to even closer. This dynamic, paired with the familiar relationship of Susan and the Doctor, makes for a great multi-person team, with each characters having a unique and interesting relationship. I truly think the dynamic of these four carry the show at the start. The stories are mostly great, but if it was not for each of these actors being perfectly cast in their role, William Hartnell especially, I don't think it would have done just as well. So thank you very much for watching. Next week we should have something special for Guy Fawkes Night, and I hopefully will start working on the second season of Doctor Who's videos soon. I very much appreciate you guys watching this. It's slightly different than usual, so let me know how you feel down in the comments, give it a like, whatever, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.